What's going on, my friends? I'm Dustin Stelzer with Electrician U, and today we have a service call. I had a customer call and they had some lights in their backyard that were shorting out. So we're gonna go check it out. There are 4 of these kind of like pedestal lights, one on each column. And the customer has a time clock, and that time clock, every time he engages it manually, turns the lights on for a split second, but then it shorts out and trips the breaker. And so I thought, first thing to diagnose is bulbs, right? Like you go look at every single bulb. Like this bulb is good. You can see the actual springs inside are still being suspended on that little, whatever that is, that little post. But that's a good bulb. And then I came over, started looking at some of the other fixtures. So a lot of times you'll see like an incandescent bulb will break off and it'll actually be touching and shorting the circuit out. Fun fact, stop using incandescent lighting. Yes, that is a fact. That is not an opinion. Stop doing it. A lot of times, especially when you've got like fixtures that are outside, windy, like you shake a bulb enough and you're gonna get that filament to break. A lot of different temperature changes, things like that. There's just no reason to be using incandescent lighting. It's super inefficient. When the filaments break, it shows up a lot of times as a short circuit, so you'll think like, why the hell is this circuit shorting out? You got to know, okay, well, let me check what kind of bulbs. If it's LEDs, that's not going to show up the same way as incandescent lighting would show up as a short, because you actually have a filament in there. When that filament flops off and breaks, a lot of times it'll actually short out. The bulbs and the screw shells and everything, they're made of a lot more like breakable type of glass, and a lot of times they shatter. There's just a whole host of reasons why I don't use incandescent lighting anymore. I only use LED. Now, another situation too is like if there's like a 20-foot ceiling and you have to go set up scaffold or go rent like a 16-foot A-frame ladder and have 2 people carry it to go change out this light bulb, don't keep putting incandescent bulbs up there. You're gonna be replacing them like every couple of years. It's just stupid. Use LEDs for everything. It'll solve your problem. And a lot of LEDs, you can actually change the colors. Like you can decide, okay, well, I want something that's lower on the Kelvin color spectrum, so it's a little bit more like orangish or yellowish. Something that's in the middle, that's kind of like a yellowish white, or you can have something that's a lot more white, that's higher on the Kelvin scale. But there's just no reason to be using incandescent lighting anymore, people. So I took, all of the bad lamps out, still shorted. Then I went and just took every single one of the lamps out, still shorted. So I was like, all right, something screwier is going on with the wiring. I went around, looked, I didn't see any junction boxes, like looked underneath here. I thought maybe there's like a junction box or something where something crazy went on. I thought maybe there was a junction box in there. I've got a GFI or a plug over here. So I was like, maybe they just ran stuff through, because every single one of these fixtures is in 12.3. So they're feeding the black through every single one of these pedestals for something, and I think it probably is how they're getting the plug circuit over here behind there. How that's getting hot. So anyways, after going around, I decided, like, some of y'all wanted me to talk about my troubleshooting and my theory and how I troubleshoot the decisions that I make. So once I realized that it wasn't just a simple lamp issue, I always go for the simplest, easiest thing first, and then I start getting more difficult. Typically how I would have done a situation like this is I would have found the middle point and I would have tried to cut the circuit in half and disconnect the joints. And if the breaker held, I know, okay, the first half of that's not where the problem is, because I just disconnected, the first half of that. If it continued, if it was the latter half of the circuit, or if the breaker still tripped after discontinuing that half of the circuit, that means the problem is still in the front half of the circuit. So that's usually how I diagnose, but there's only 4 lights here. And so I was like, all right, well, it's not gonna take me that long. I might as well start at one fixture, start at every single fixture and just take each one apart. It's outdoor. I realized it was in Romex, so it's like, you know what I'm gonna do is take
every fixture apart. I'm gonna ohm out, check continuity between the black and the white and the black and the ground, and make sure that each fixture, something's not shorted out inside of the fixture. Because, you know, like there's all kinds of like bugs and crazy shit and moisture that gets inside of here. It could have just shorted out inside of one of those actual sockets. So I took this apart, checked the fixture, wasn't the fixture. I took the wire nuts apart so it isolated everything else down there, and I went and turned the breaker on, and my line side, my incoming side, was still good. I had good power on it. So I was like, okay, well then I ohmed out, and I figured my hot and ground somewhere down this whole line are getting continuity together right here. So I went to the next fixture, disconnected the blacks and the whites here, so it basically isolated all the rest of that stuff. And then I went back over, reconnected my joints right there, which sent my power from there to here now. Had clean power, breaker didn't trip, so I know, okay, up to this point, I'm good to go. I checked the fixture, there was no short inside the fixture. So I moved the knowns over here. My unknowns were still on this side, so I did the same thing. I just left everything disconnected, came over here, disconnected everything in this fixture, checked the fixture, fixture was good. Then I went over, reconnected these, and it went and reconnected the breaker, and it still tripped. So I was like, oh shit, okay. So in between here and here, there's something screwy with that wire. So I went over here, and I was like, what's going on over here? Wait, why do we only have one red? If they're going in series, there should be an incoming red and an outgoing red going over there. So what the hell's going on in between there? So I think what happened is they probably ran, for some reason, they ran their underground smurf tube from there, skipped this fixture, went straight to this one, because this one has a black, or it has a, you know, an incoming red and outgoing red. From here, then it goes over here. So that was just something screwy. Maybe they forgot something or whatever when they were wiring this place 10 years ago, and they went and just changed the order of everything. But then, of course, it's always the last one you check, right? Like, it's never the first thing you check, it's always the very last thing you check. Down on the bottom there, you see that little red wire that's scored? You can see a little bit of copper showing on it. It was touching that ground. This is the reason you don't pull Romex in, you know, outdoor applications in conduit. There's so much moisture over time that this sheathing has just been sitting in water, weakening the insulation. That's why we don't use Romex inside of wet environments.
Code time. Let's look into this whole Romex inside of electrical non-metallic tubing. Should we be putting Romex inside of ENT? Should we be putting this, is this considered a wet environment? Like, is there really a code violation in this instance? Let's look at a couple of different places. So to find this, you're gonna have to look, if I were out in the field and had my code book out, I would probably try to look in a few different locations. First, the first and foremost, what I would be looking for searching through code is, okay, if I look up non-metallic sheath cable or Romex, does it say anything about installing it in wet locations, dry locations, and the like? So let's go over to 334 for non-metallic sheath cable types NM and NMC. Now this is type NM cable, this is not NMC. I know that for sure. So the first thing I do is I look around, there's uses permitted, it shows a whole bunch of things that you can do with it. Then I go to uses not permitted, which is 334.12, and I go down to B because that is type NM specifically. Type A is for NM and NMC. Type B applies in excess of NMC to specifically just NM. It says NM cable should not be used in the following conditions. We're exposed to corrosive fumes, that doesn't apply. Where embedded in masonry, concrete, adobe fill, or plaster, that could apply, but really it's inside of a conduit. It's not the actual Romex itself that is inside, embedded into the cement. So that doesn't really apply. In shallow chase in masonry, that doesn't apply. Or in wet or damp locations. Well, I think we could probably consider this a wet or damp location, being as we're looking at these conductors and they are both wet and damp. But is the inside of a conduit considered a dry location because you're not getting water in? Most conduits, though, if they go underground, do get moist. A lot of water gets inside of conduits. So you have to kind of look for conduits then. If we look in Article 100 under definitions, go to the L's for locations. And dude, if you're watching this, open your code book. Like, this is the best way to learn code. You're on a job, you have a specific problem, you look up code. So pause this and look up all of this stuff in code with me. All right, so we go to L's. That is where the damp, wet, and dry locations are. You can't go to the D to find dry location or W for wet. It's kind of stupid, but I get it. It's locations. So look for location damp. Damp location is a location protected from weather and not subject to saturation with water or other liquids, but subject to moderate degrees of moisture. I would say that this environment in general, this masonry under this light where there's a potential for water to get underneath of this. There's no weatherproof seal or anything. I would call this a damp location. It's directly, in where rain could be. Now, the inside of the conduit itself, I don't know that you would classify that as a damp location. What about wet? Wet location says it's installations underground or in concrete slabs or masonry in direct contact with the earth, in locations subject to saturation with water or other liquids, such as vehicle washing areas, and in unprotected locations exposed to weather. Okay, so I would say that this tubing in this specific instance is probably that. Now, they ran this tubing in the slab, most likely they didn't do this after the masonry the structure was actually built, the rocks that everything is sitting on. Could be wrong, I can't see that, but I know that the rock structure is a masonry structure on the slab. So I can assume that this is in a slab. Even if it's not, it says, or masonry in direct contact with the earth. Well, the slab, this masonry structure and everything, it's hard to classify, right? Like, this masonry is not in contact with the earth, but it's in contact with the slab, so we don't know, does it go through the slab or not. But I would call this environment, this situation, a very wet or damp environment. So I would personally classify the inside of the conduit, in this case, a wet environment, or at least a damp environment. If it were in an attic somewhere and we were running through ENT and we had this Romex that was running through this ENT conduit, no, that's a dry location. It's not going to be exposed and in any way get moist. But when I open the fixtures, every single one of these conductors at every one of the locations is wet. Therefore, I'm classifying it as a wet environment. So the last thing that we can look in, Article 300 is wiring methods and materials. So this is the general requirements for any kind of wiring methods or materials that you're going to put in. 300.5b, in underground installations, it says a wet location, the interior of enclosures or raceways installed underground, shall be considered to be a wet location. Insulated conductors and cables installed in these enclosures or raceways in underground installations shall comply with 310.10c. So 310.10c, that goes into actual conductors. That's what 310 is. It just says that they have to be of a type listed for use in wet locations. So Romex, NM, just standard NM, not NMC or any other variations of non-metallic sheath cable. NM is not a listed conductor for wet environments. So that, again, it's a little ambiguous, right? We're not underground. This conduit doesn't go underground. We don't know. It might go underground. It might go into the slab, but it's definitely wet. So the other thing to do, I guess, to get around this is maybe you could just like silicone and put some waterproofing and things like that. If it isn't an underground tubing, if it is just going through the masonry and it's not in contact with the earth, then I guess you could get away with calling it a dry location on the inside of this tubing. But I just thought that was an interesting kind of issue. Sometimes code is a little ambiguous in trying to figure out, well, can I do this or can I not? A lot of it's up to interpretation. And a lot of times there's extra books, there's like handbooks that you can buy that have extra bits of interpretation. And then there's all these code gurus and people that are on the code making panel that have their own books that they make, how they interpret code differently. And then you've got local authorities like AHJs, cities, inspectors, that it's their inspectors or their jurisdictions decision making. It's up to them to interpret how this code reads. So there's some stuff that you can't really find an exact answer to. But in this instance, I notice all of these conductors are getting wet. So I think just the decision to use Romex, knowing that it is not a conductor that's okay to be run in wet environments, even if this were a dry environment on the inside of this conduit, just knowing that there's a possibility of it getting wet, I wouldn't have run these conductors. I would have run THHN or some kind of weatherproof listed like conductor that's listed for a wet environment.
There's nothing I can do. Like, this guy doesn't want to pay to have me come and try to figure out where this wire goes and try to like pull it, because I guarantee it goes up in the wall. We'd have to cut sheetrock to try to pull this wire out. So all I'm gonna do is tape it up. There's nothing else going on in there. If I can at least just create a barrier between the insulation of this that's shorted out and that ground, that's really the best thing that I can do. Just for the time being, at least, that'll get it going.
Now, so it kind of seems like putting tape on this is just a cheap fix, but when you think about the alternatives, what other things did we have? I could have put some heat shrink wrap on it, as long as I had some heat shrink that was listed to be used as an insulator for an electrical installation. I could have just used like a regular heat shrink and just been like, well, whatever, I'm just heat shrinking. I just didn't do that. That's not what I decided to do. Plus, just getting down in there and trying to get heat shrink around all of that just seemed like a huge pain in the ass, whereas tape was just fine. The other thing I could have done maybe is I could have tried to like pull as much slack. Well, I did. You couldn't get any slack, but I could have tried to like maybe cut that conductor at the point where it was scored and, you know, stripped it out and put a butt splice on it. But then if the butt splice ever comes off, now you got a conductor that's this long and you're trying to deal with, you know, down there. So I think that just putting tape on this, as like maybe hacky as that looks, is the best choice for this installation. Obviously, again, the best thing to do would just be to replace this wire altogether, but that's not going to happen on this job.
All right, so now I got my tape on. I just need to check continuity. For those of you who don't know, continuity is this one, the little like Wi-Fi looking symbol. That makes sure that it's gonna send a tone. Basically, it sends a signal from one lead through the meter to another lead if there's a loop. So my hot ground should not be continuous. They shouldn't be touching. Hot and neutral should not be continuous. They shouldn't be touching. Neutral and ground shouldn't be continuous. Well, that's not necessarily true. They actually should be continuous because it should have a path all the way back to the service where they're bonded. Have a video on bonding that you can watch right here as to why we bond. But yeah, coming from the panel, you're going to have any wires that are basically a home run coming from the panel should ohm out ground to neutral. If I were to disconnect all of these, anything going out to the loads should not. You know, then you've got a problem. But bonding back at the panel, that's why they would tone out. So everything seems good here. I'm gonna put the fixture back together. Forgot my GoPro, guys. I'm sorry. There's so many things to remember, man. You know, my cameras should probably be one of the most important things to remember. Ugh, all these wire nuts are like rusted to hell. I'm also using these new, I guess they're kind of like stripper lineman's pliers. It's an interesting thing because you don't have the same high leverage that you would have with a normal set of linemen's. You don't always need that, but with twisting joints, it just feels a little bit weird. It feels, I don't know, just kind of feels different. So it's something that I'm having to get used to. I didn't like the feeling of it at first, but it's growing on me. If you notice, I am also rocking the needle nose strippers. So it's kind of like almost the same tools, really. Slightly different. I like how the cutting edge of the strippers is on the side rather than in the middle of the tool. Like these ones, you know, like the stripping is so deep inside that it's hard to gauge how much of the wire you're stripping out, whereas this is a little bit easier because you can actually see where that is. And then of course I'm using my 6-in-1 multi-tool. This thing is 2 different sizes of Phillips, 5/16 nut driver, 2 different sizes of flat, 1/4-inch nut driver. This is like my favorite multi-tool of all time. I don't like the 11-in-1s, I don't like 13-in-1s or 5-in-1s or any of that other shit. This guy is my go-to. It's extended reach. These things lock in place. They don't ever just like get loose and fall out like a lot of the other ones do.
All right, so that's pretty much it. Very, very simple job. Unfortunately, my idiot self did not film any of like the lights turning on to give you guys that. I'm like so ready to get out of there that I just pack up all my stuff, make sure I've got everything, and then I don't film the part that completes it. So I'm sorry for that, but that was a pretty simple job. Again, a lot of you guys have been requesting lately that I do some kind of like troubleshooting stuff to show the methodology. Please definitely leave some comments below if there's different ways you would have gone about things, if you interpret the code in the code time that I was talking about differently, or if there's something you think that I missed. Always leave that below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please join this channel subscription membership thingy so that you can be one of these rad cool people with your name on the screen. From time to time, I like to put some little pictures and video clips and stuff like that out. Stuff that I'm doing behind the scenes or extra tools that I get or things like that that a lot of you don't get to see. The members do get to see. I just added a new level of membership as well. So now there's a way that you can text and chat with me by getting my phone number. If you are a 1,000-volt member, there's a brand new membership tier. So if you want to be able to text with me and be a homie, bother me on the weekend with your silly questions, you can do that. Join the 1,000-volt members. Like always, hit the little subscribe thing because it helps me out a lot if you subscribe. If you watch all these, please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up, hit the little notification bell. I love you crazy fuckers. See you in the next one.
Best music and video.